We are approaching the second full moon of Taylor Swift's career. 1989, Taylor's version, by all accounts, is going to be the re-recording. She said it in her announcement post that she's really confident this record is going to be something like we've never heard before from the project so far. And it was very smart of her to place this record's release in the middle or towards the end of the project, as it's her best-selling record and kind of her career-defining masterpiece. To me, 1989 is one of Taylor's very few near bulletproof records. Folklore is the only one that, in my opinion, matches this in quality, consistency, reputational impact, and critical acclaim. This record completely changed the course of her career and catapulted her into a level of stardom she had not previously enjoyed. This era was about liberation, womanhood, and dominance. The events of this record cycle are still felt in her career and in the pop music landscape right now. If you were to truly divide Taylor's career into an old Taylor and a new Taylor, I would say that 1989 is the beginning of Taylor 2.0, the gold-plated cyborgian robot, the rise of the girl boss. Now, we're used to Taylor being an omnipresent figure in our culture without really having to do anything other than post on Instagram. However, the workhorse appear everywhere, blast the public with a relentless promotional strategy of 1989 is what laid the groundwork for her hands-off approach now. There were significant shifts in her personal life that led to this new, confident supermodel version of the ever-relatable Taylor Swift. Moving to New York, staying single, discovering feminism courtesy of Lena Dunham, and pushing back on her label and insisting on her creative vision, trying new things, experimenting sonically, and picking a lane. 1989 was her first official pop record, and that's so much more important than it seems now that we know her as this huge pop artist. This record also cemented her as a commercial force to be reckoned with, whether it was the sheer force of her selling power or her outspoken stance on streaming issues and her ability to tank other artists' careers and use her stature as a celebrity to silence her critics. She enjoyed a new level of power during this era that would eventually be her temporary undoing. The girl bossery of it all is truly something to unpack, and we're going to do that today. In this video, I will discuss how this record met the moment, as always, what culture it emerged into, the creative process that went into making it, the release of the album, and its legacy and impact ahead of 1989 Taylor's version. You can consider this a complete history of 1989. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. My name is Zach. I am the Swiftologist, and I make thoughtful weekly content about pop culture. We are in 1989 month. All of my videos this month are going to be about Taylor's incredible fifth album, career-defining, legacy-making project. I hope you'll jump along for the ride. I know that over 50% of you that watch my videos are not subscribed, so please do subscribe. It really helps me out. And also, my Twitchologist journey, my live streaming adventures, we just watched the 1989 tour, and Journey to Fearless is going really well. So if you want to check out my streaming schedule, head over to my Twitch, and if you're not able to catch them live, you can see all episodes, all the on-demand video versions of those streams on the Patreon, which is also where the exclusive content for Evolution of a Snake, my Taylor Swift podcast, lies, which you simply must check out if you're trying to learn a lot about the Taylor. It is, I would say, the most complete document on the internet, chronicling Taylor, the fandom culture around her, and the specifics of her life. So let's start this complete history of 1989 by examining the moment that it was birthed into. We, of course, start our story at the 2014 Grammys. This is where the real journey begins. Taylor has mentioned at length how much of her art is created in reaction or response to criticism of her prior works. And this is a really interesting way to create that I think she has mostly broken free of by now, but is part of what made the first 5 records of her career so interesting, complex, and diverse. So on January 26th, we have the fateful hallowed event, the Grammys. She's nominated for Album of the Year, Best Country Album, Best Country Song for Begin Again, and Country Duo for Highway Don't Care. She loses each and every one of the Grammys. This is a poor showing for Taylor, and this is a very upsetting catalyst for future events for her, and it is the night that I would say she turned into a cyborg. She returns home and really ruminates on a singular piece of criticism about Red that she attributes to her not being awarded appropriately at the Grammys. It was chaotic. It was all over the place, perceived by some as unfocused, trying to do too many things at once. And when she got her Grammy nominations, there was actually quite a bit of discourse around people being displeased with Red being nominated as a country record when songs like We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together, 22, and I Knew You Were Trouble really dominated its release and its position in the public. Simply put, the criticism of Red was Taylor Swift needs to pick a lane. And so she did. She decided in her account very suddenly in the middle of the night that she had to create a pop album and it needed to be sonically cohesive. This was an extremely contentious issue in her creative process, but we'll get into that later. Thus far in her career, Taylor wasn't really a critical force to be reckoned with, although the evolution of Red did help some. Her music was always met with this kind of misogynistic, to be frank, and begrudging appreciation. Yeah, this is teenage girl music. I mean, it's kind of good for what it is, but whatever. It sells a lot, so therefore it's cynical, it's dead-eyed, it's not authentic. She can't possibly be the mastermind behind this success. Her challenge now was, how can I make something that continues to appeal broadly and widely, that also garners a critical appreciation or an artistic excellence that really can't be denied? How can I make the music industry take me seriously as an artist? And the answer was focus. In February of 2014, after losing Album of the Year at the Grammys, in London, she does the unthinkable, cuts her hair into a fuck-ass bulb. And this is the metaphorical shedding of skin, and also a weirdly big moment for her. She said that she wanted a fresh slate and a new beginning, and the hair was part of that. In March, she continues her girl boss evolution and moves to New York City. This is extremely significant. It's a physical representation of her departure from country music and her continued progression into being a pop star, leaving Nashville and moving to the epicenter of cool girl. Instantly, she is parading about town with her short hair and her Victoria's Secret fashion model friends and her weird handbag arm, which begins a very iconic period of time where there are almost daily paparazzi pictures of Taylor. New York definitely becomes a muse for her. It's both a setting and a character, the backdrop to her growing up and the force that inspires her to take the bull by the horns. We start to get real, actual Easter eggs, not, methodically calculated things, but genuine clues and teasers of what's to come. On the 1st of April, she posts a pic of her looking coyly at the camera from the sea with the caption, "For whatever we lose, a you or a me, it's always ourselves we find in the sea." This was a 1989 Easter egg, given, the motif of the sea, the gulls, the shore, the waves. She's also at this time making more appearances than is usual for her downtime between record cycles. She's not taking herself so seriously, which is a very important part of the evolution of her artistry. She makes a brief appearance on SNL. During Seth Rogen's monologue, she shows up and says, "Whenever a man shows emotion, I appear." And I think that this also redirects the narrative about her being boy crazy. It finally allows her to laugh at herself rather than feeling wounded about the reputation that has begun to emerge. We then also have her fashion evolution. She is finally invited to the Met Gala by herself as a star, and she starts wearing crop top two-piece sets. And also, she logs onto Instagram and starts liking fan photos. This is the beginning of an era of fan service, which was something that was very important in establishing dominance in the music industry and also promoting this record. As the Red Tour concludes in June of 2014, 2 months before Shake It Off, she posts on Instagram, literally the night that the tour ended, with a handwritten note saying, "Just so you know, there are far, far greater things ahead than anything else we leave behind." In July, she pulls her catalog from Spotify. Streaming was very new and contentious at the time, and she penned an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, which basically sets her up for a very sanctimonious season of preaching and wielding her industry power. Of course, she wasn't able to hold off streaming forever, but she certainly tried to renegotiate terms that were more favorable to artists. And she said, "Music is art is rare and valuable, and it should not be free." Scott Borchetta fully supports this decision. Around this time, Project Cardinal is undertaken, and this is the video shoot for Shake It Off. If you remember in the last sequence of that video, there are a bunch of fans dancing behind her. Taylor Nation scours the net for fans, and one gets uninvited actually for posting her invitation online. This is the beginning of the escalation of parasocial relationships and the competitiveness of the fandom culture that we see now. And it's always important to talk about what was kind of going on in the wider music industry when we're talking about how an artist really made a splash or an impact. I think in 2014, the first half of it at least, EDM, pop, and Uber Lyft music was really taking the radio by storm, and it was also kind of gasping for air alongside these kind of platitudinal, boring ballads that were very en vogue. So it was bland, generic, corporate pop hit one after the other. We had Dark Horse by Katy Perry, Happy by Pharrell, Timber by Pitbull and Kesha, Fancy by Iggy Azalea, All of Me by John Legend, Let It Go from Frozen. It all felt a little bit uninspired. Now let's talk about the creative process of making this album. So as we well and truly know, Taylor had veered kind of directly into supersonic pop with the singles on Red. She enlisted the most influential pop savants of the moment, Max Martin and Johann Shellback, noted pop writing bandits, to kind of help her establish this pop dominance, again, all over the record for 1989. She also crowned a new king of pop production here, Jack Antonoff. His footprint is all over pop music now, and I think we overlook the hand that Taylor played in elevating him to the realm of the pop girls. To go forward and make something different, Taylor looked back. She was hugely influenced by 80s pop when she was making this record, which makes sense because I think that is a huge influence for Jack as well. Annie Lennox and Peter Gabriel were two artists that she noted as inspirations. Annie Lennox's work with Eurythmics is the most clear inspiration for me. Sweet Dreams Are Made of These. Heard of it? Lennox was known for having an art pop or a sophistopop approach to music, making commercial pop music with an experimental element. And Taylor certainly leaned into this philosophy in her own way, most notably on the closer of the standard edition of 1989, Clean, with Imogen Heap, where the instrumental features a genuinely strange and vast array of production. Annie Lennox sonically also created songs with massive synths and electronic drum elements. We catch that all over 1989 as well. What's so interesting about the creative process for this is that Taylor was clearly more focused than ever before on how things sounded versus what she was saying. And I think this was the beginning of a stylistic shift in her career, where she parked her core skill, that core skill being storytelling, immersive storytelling, for 3 records, 1989, Reputation, and Lover, and moved on to develop an ancillary skill of hers, which was vocal delivery, cadence, breaking the fourth wall, and virality. Ultimately, her main collaborators throughout this album were Max and Johan, Jack Antonoff, Imogen Heap, Nathan Chapman, and Ryan Tedder. She gave Max Martin an executive production credit on this record because he vocally produced all of the songs on the record, even the ones that he wasn't the main producer on, because she really wanted to create a sonic cohesion where all of these songs blended into each other and played all the way through without any sort of jarring interruptions, very dissimilar to Red. This era also saw her writing in a way that she had never written before, to track. Usually, Taylor comes up with the melody and the lyrics to a song before she brings it to a producer, then builds the soundscape or the sonic world around the song. But with 1989, and specifically with Jack Antonoff, she wrote to instrumental tracks that he had already created. She did this with I Wish You Would and Out of the Woods, and he was flabbergasted by how complete the voice notes that she sent back to him were after one go at writing a song to the track. And what's interesting here is that I think that Taylor had a sort of creative direction that I don't think she had before. Rather than booking writing sessions and going in and kicking ideas around and seeing what happened, she sought out specific producers for specific songs. So Clean was something she really wanted Imogen Heap to work on. So when she was in London, she brought the song completely finished, lyrics, melody, everything, and said, do your magic and make it sound kind of the way that I'm telling you to. And it was the same with Ryan Tedder and I Know Places. He said that she was fastidious about her production and she rejected his cuts many, many times. And he said that the best artists that he works with are the ones that don't automatically accept the work that he gives them on the first try. And she brought her most old Taylor number on this record to her tried and true Nathan Chapman. Sonically, this record picks up where the singles from Red left off and goes even further. Programmed drums, barely any live guitar, rare for her, and much shorter songs compared to her 5-minute masterpieces, and a lot of vocal processing. Interestingly, she wanted the songs to sound the way the feelings felt, but she didn't really want to say what she was feeling. Out of the Woods, for example, it tells you what's happening. She wanted to communicate the anxiety of a relationship, but it doesn't really give you a clear picture of how she feels about the situation in real time. From a writing perspective, this album is incredibly interesting because, as I mentioned, it deviates from her core skill of narrative songwriting to achieve a new feat. John Karaminka of the New York Times described this album as slightly neutered in his review of it. And when we look at the perspective in these songs, you can see the difference between this work and her prior work. Firstly, there's a lot of plural pronouns on this record. Every night with us is like a dream. We're the new romantics. We never go out of style. When we first dropped our bags on apartment floors, you're moving with her to New York. You're in her shoes. It's aiming for a generality that goes beyond the very specific diaristic confessions of Red. And the stories themselves are more often than not built around a conceit or an idea rather than an experience or an emotion. All You Had to Do Was Stay was a dream she had where her ex showed up at her house in the middle of the night with this high-pitched stay coming out of his mouth. Never going out of style as a concept. Heard of it. Shaking it off. Hiding from the paparazzi in I Know Places and becoming clean after a particularly troubling period of time. The specifics of these scenarios are further away. They're like composite sketches. They leave room for you to insert your life experiences onto hers. You can superimpose yourself onto the Taylor Swift story, and essentially you can make this album part of your life. I think this is why people connected to it and resonated with it so widely when it came out. We also have thematically throughout the writing on this record her becoming sentient of her public persona. Before then, she didn't really break the fourth wall or address the things about her that maybe people didn't like. Shake It Off and Blank Space are both really good examples of ways for her to reclaim what people were saying about her and reorient the conversation, revealing very little while injecting a sense of humor and a knowingness that made her seem as though she was in on the joke. Her perspective and distance is very measured and controlled here. There is much less active heartbreak and more wistful and nostalgic reflection. Songs like All You Had to Do Was Stay and I Wish You Would have this cool-eyed sadness to them that is very different and far away from the burning heartache that we had on Red. There's also thematically a very specific kind of growing up on this record. She had always been careful to mature with her audience and not alienate them by having a jarring transition into adulthood a la Miley Cyrus's Bangers. So we can see this evolution happening over time. In Speak Now, she's got a drawer at her boy's place, rather chaste, but on Red, she's following her lover home in the middle of the night and dancing around his kitchen, which implies that she slept over, and on Wildest Dreams, most scandalously, her hands are in his hair and her clothes are in his room. Growing up was a very deliberate and delicate balance for her, and I think, after the cancellation, she got to do it a lot faster, but the ways that she did it on 1989 were really subtle, but also progressive. She got to move forward and advance with her audience without alienating people or making her brand unfamily friendly. What we don't really know about this creative process, but we do have kind of glimpses and glimmers of, is how difficult it was for her. And this is something that I'm hoping that we get to hear more about in the foreword that she gives to 1989 Taylor's version. When she first turned in this record, she says the head of her label, Scott Borchetta, Evil Man, told her, "This is extraordinary. It's the best album you've ever done. Can you just give me 3 country songs?" And Taylor's response was, "Love you, mean it, but this is how it's going to be." Now let's talk about the circus of the release and promotion of this record. The live chat was where it all began. She says, "Welcome to New York on top of the Empire State Building," and comes the fuck into the room. A bunch of fans gathered there who got to later go to her house for what was a fledgling secret session. She said she had 3 surprises to introduce: Shake It Off, which she played and danced with the fans for. Then she talked about 1989 being her first pop album. She was very clear about it being a pop album and nothing more than that. And then she played the video for Shake It Off. And this was very different for the live chats that we had come to know and love as fans. It was a lot more high budget. There was a lot more messaging going on rather than just Easter egging. And she talked a lot in this live chat as well about how she listened to late 80s pop and how that was her inspiration. And she said that it was a time of limitless potential, and the idea that you can do what you want, be whoever you want, inspired her. Bold chances and rebellion. Shake It Off was sent to radio on the 18th of August, and it received mixed reviews from critics. It was a jarring transition, and some fans even were not really on board with it when it first came out. Some of them thought that the productions were good, but the lyrics were vapid to compared with what had been done on Red, and that was kind of the point, but they didn't know that yet. Despite a semi-lukewarm reception, it debuted at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 the following week, and it was truly a cultural moment. It also started the beginning of the Taylor think piece era. There were many essays about cultural appropriation from some of the visuals that she included in this video. The Washington Post did a roundtable on whether or not it was offensive. So then she's everywhere. She's at the VMAs, she's in Europe, she's on TV in the UK. She's also doing something that she didn't do very much in previous album cycle releases. She's talking a lot about the album and using her personal life to drive intrigue and interest in a way that was much less coy than she had been in the past. She was inviting people to play her life like it was a game, giving them clues and recipes, and being more accessible than ever before on social media. And while she's talking about the record, she's sticking to some very important brand building themes: being single and hanging out with her girlfriends, embracing the feminism that she learned from Lena Dunham, and pushing back on the sexist response to her writing about boys and how that minimizes her art, moving to New York and being an independent grown-up. Here's some of the personal stories that she divulged to Rolling Stone 2 months before the album came out that definitely became part of the lore of this record. The Katy Perry drama. This is exactly what was written about it. Swift's focus on sisterhood cuts both ways, because when another woman crosses her, she's equally fierce about hitting back. The angriest song on 1989 is called Bad Blood, and it's about another female artist that Swift declines to name. "For years, I was never sure if we were friends or not," she says. "She would come up to me at award shows and say something and walk away. And I would think, are we friends, or did she just give me the harshest insult of my life?" Then last year, the other star crossed a line. "She did something so horrible," Swift says. "I was like, oh, we're just straight up enemies. And it wasn't even about a guy. It had to do with business. She basically tried to sabotage an entire arena tour. She tried to hire a bunch of people out from under me, and I'm surprisingly non-confrontational. You would not believe how much I hate conflict. So now I have to avoid her. It's awkward and I don't like it." Pressed, Swift admits there might have been a personal element to the conflict, but I don't think there would be any personal problem if she weren't competitive, Taylor says. We're going to get more into that in my video next week on the Katy Perry Taylor Swift feud. Then she talks about Harry Styles and the snowmobile accident that is depicted in Out of the Woods. Swift won't say much about her relationship with Styles other than that they're now friends, but talking to her, it seemed clear that many of the songs on 1989 that are about a guy are about him. So while she's talking about the album and appearing everywhere to promote it, she begins what was the other very important factor in the promotion and success of this record: fan service. She joins Tumblr.com, and she is in on the joke immediately. She wears a shirt that says "No, it's Becky," referencing a meme that had been going around the fandom for years. Stars really were not accessible like this to their fans ever before. She only furthers this kind of parasocial relationship building by launching the Secret Sessions. On the 29th of September, the first event was held in Nashville. Fans were invited to come into her home and hear the entire album, eat food, and take Polaroids with Taylor. This was a big news story at the time because of how wacky and unusual it was. Imagine this just out of context. Most famous person in the world allows a bunch of random strangers into her house, bakes them food, and takes pictures with them. Weird. This becomes kind of a self-generating publicity machine. Every time there's a secret session, a little bit more information trickles out, more pictures emerge, and they're all in that Polaroid style, which is very effective branding for the visual style of the record that went on to become so iconic. It was the start of getting her fans to kind of do some of the promotional work for her. So the second pre-release album track that we get before the record comes out, no official second single on the horizon, by the way, was Out of the Woods. And this was received with much more acclaim from critics who praised the frantic production, and I think it gave a better insight into what we could expect from 1989. chock full of good writing, but also bangers. And this peaks at number 18 on the Hot 100. Now let's talk about the visuals. So the visuals and the artistic direction for this record were kind of, I guess, larger than life for the videos, especially glossy, high-budget productions that had a cool vintage vibe to them more often than not. Inside the album, Taylor included pictures taken with a Polaroid camera, an iconic aesthetic that was very popular in the 1980s, and the cover is a Polaroid portrait of Taylor's face cut off at the eyes, which Taylor said she hoped would bring about a sense of mystery. I didn't want them to see a smiling picture on the cover and think this was a happy album, or see a sad-looking facial expression and think, oh, this is another breakup. She definitely maintained an element of surprise for this record that I think was really effective in reorienting people's perception of her as a musician. On the record, she's wearing red lipstick, of course, and a sweatshirt embroidered with flying seagulls. All of the photos that are included inside the album booklet are slightly out of focus and mostly shot from far away, furthering that distance between us and her, making her seem more and more surreal and larger than life. To encourage physical sales, which were declining in the era of digital downloads, she included specific Polaroid packages with each record and, encouraged fans to go out and collect them all. I fell prey to this marketing strategy, of course. All you had to do was stay Polaroid still on my wall to this day. The record ended up selling 1.2 million copies in its first week of sales. And this is, as I mentioned, at a time when digital downloads were killing physical sales. Nobody was moving records like this. I'm going to return to John Karaminka's New York Times review of the 1989 because I think it's such a perfect encapsulation of how she was received in 2014. He calls attention to the fact that Taylor somehow continues to portray herself as the underdog, despite having a growing public image of supermodel looks. This was a tension that was only going to develop over the 1989 era. And he also said, by making pop with almost no contemporary references, Miss Swift is aiming somewhere even higher, a mode of timelessness that few true pop stars, aside from, say, Adele, who has a vocal gift that demands such an approach, even bother aspiring to. Everyone else striving to sound like now will have to shift gears once the sound changes, but not Miss Swift, who's waging and winning a new war, one that she'll never admit to fighting. Weirdly, Rolling Stone notes that This Love and How You Get the Girl are album highlights, and they described this record as deeply weird, feverishly emotional, wildly enthusiastic. 1989 sounds exactly like Taylor Swift, even when it sounds like nothing she's ever tried before. So then about a week after 1989 comes out, Taylor pulls her entire music catalog off of Spotify, and this is quickly followed by a Time magazine cover called The Power of Taylor Swift. She again denounces Spotify in this, and the writer did a really good job of kind of describing where she was at the moment. They described her as, at her best, she can write stories like Joni Mitchell's and set them to melodies as memorable as Pharrell's, but she can also sell like ABBA, traverse genres, proving stronger than the format constraints that have strangled scores of high-profile artists, and attract an audience that seems more vast and more loyal than any other artist is. This is something that I think we can even see developing and extending into today. Taylor told this writer that she felt like this about 1989. There is no country on this album. Pretend I'm a new artist that just needs to make this album that defines her career. Taylor then does more promotional offense. She has an interview with Barbara Walters, 10 Most Fascinating People. This is a series she used to do. And Taylor in this interview said that she was not worried about losing fans with this jump because she knew that if she kept the lyrics smart, then the fans would stay. And she was totally right about that. The single choices are pretty excellent for this record, and this is definitely her best executed album rollout. The second official single from 1989 is Blank Space, and it's accompanied by what is probably her most iconic music video of all time. Joseph Kahn, you were doing amazing, sweetie. Blank Space spent 7 weeks at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and was certified 8 times platinum. The music video received critical acclaim for the quality of the cinematography and for Taylor's satirical performance, and for the visual commentary on the media's perception of her love life. It also drew a lot of comparisons to Gone Girl. The media just loved this video, even though it was kind of them that she was lambasting, very ironic, and it was praised for its feminist overtones and Kubrickian style. Fun fact, this video also won an Emmy for the app that came with it. Who remembers playing with that stupid app? It was truly useless, but I guess Emmy award winning. Blank Space is also listed by Rolling Stone as one of the top 100 greatest music videos of all time. I would say this is right behind Look What You Made Me Do for me in iconic Taylor Swift visuals. The style video is not much to write home about, but it's probably her most overtly artsy project, and the single charts fairly well but wasn't promoted that much due to some stuff that was going on in her personal life. There is then a big push for Bad Blood, an elaborate multi-week campaign where Taylor enlists basically every willing, alive, and able famous woman on the planet to join her in a video about killing Katy Perry. Cricket. More on that next week. This song had a remix with Kendrick Lamar, which was a very prescient decision of hers. It borrowed some credibility from an artist that was really widely respected at the time and became another #1 hit for her. And then we have the 5th single, which was Wildest Dreams, a glorious music video visually to me that was certainly criticized for having colonial overtones and using Africa as a backdrop. The last 30 seconds of that video, however, are absolutely stunning, and it was just another excellent song that charted in the top 5. Now, the darker side to 1989 was how she weaponized the status and power of her new cool girlness and amassed her best friends to kind of do her bidding and inadvertently inadvertently made other people feel bad about themselves by watching this group of Amazonian supermodels running around and hashtagging every post with Girl Squad. This is something that she addressed in an interview during the Lover era, and she listed as a regret. She mentioned that she didn't even think about how it would come across because she had never felt like the cool girl that people wanted to sit with, and it was never her intention. But she acknowledges that this was definitely alienating. There was also her bizarre fixation on trying to become a Victoria's Secret fashion model. She really, even embarked upon the 1989 World Tour, which was kind of similar to Era's tour, actually, as a spectacle. It seemed like everyone was tuned in to see what random ass person she would drag out onto the stage to do an awkward strut down that Victoria's Secret fashion show catwalk every single night. There is also the story of how Taylor had actually become intolerant to criticism of her work, which is very ironic despite her frequent insistence that it had played such a pivotal role in the creation of this record. Eve Barlow was a journalist that wrote something very nice about Taylor, was invited into her fold, and then when she wrote a critical review of the 1989 World Tour, she was slowly not only shut out of Taylor's circle, but of other music industry related events. There's a very interesting article about it that I think has been taken down now, but you can listen to our summary of it in our yearly summary of Taylor Swift's life, 2015 part 1 on the evolution of a snake. So this kind of suppression of dissent would of course become an unwinnable fight, as we saw in the dissolution of her reputation. Watch my Miss Americana video to get into that a little bit more. So what's the legacy of 1989? I think it's widely accepted as her best pop record. It won Album of the Year at the Grammys for a reason. To me, this is her most deserved Album of the Year win of all time. 1989's commercial success really transformed her from just a regular country teen pop singer to a bona fide pop star. Its singles received a heavy rotation on US radio over the year and a half following its release, which Billboard called a kind of cultural omnipresence that was rare for a 2010s album, as streaming and digital downloads were coming in to disrupt the length of an era. I think 1989 also completely changed the way artists interact with their fans, with promotion, and with social media. She was just everywhere all of the time and going out of her way, going the extra mile to seem like the most approachable and relatable person in the world, which of course is a very key part of her brand. For Taylor as an artist, I think this record really permitted her to be more experimental on future projects and to lean into the camp of her persona and become more free and break that fourth wall as an artist and let us into a different kind of autobiographical Taylor. And there are also moments on this record, for example, You Are in Love, that are about, documenting other people's struggles. You could argue that that thread kind of slowly unraveled and unraveled until we got to Folklore and Evermore, where she let her imagination run wild. So that's what I've got for you on 1989. I am so excited to hear Taylor's version, and I can't wait to dissect exactly how all of these songs contribute to our picture of this record and our appreciation of this era. I would love to know in the comments below what your favorite moment from the 1989 era was. How does this album stack in your objective ranking of Taylor's best albums? And what song are you most looking forward to hearing re-recorded, not vault track? What do you want to hear Taylor's version of the most? Don't forget to subscribe, check out the Patreon, and I will see you in my next video for 1989 month. Goodbye, Swifties.